Welcome to Sakshi TV's special immigration talk show with attorney Ms. Prashanthi Reddy. I am Preeti Mulbagal, your host for the show. Ms. Prashanthi Reddy is an accomplished attorney with an experience of over 17 years. Ms. Reddy was admitted to the bar in New York and is a member of American Immigration Lawyers. She is listed in the Forbes magazine as one of the best immigration lawyers in New York. She was voted as a super lawyer and is listed in the marquee of Who's Who of 2024-25. She was also recognized by the American Institute of Legal Counsel as one of the best 10 immigration attorneys in New York. She is currently involved in pro bono legal work and also volunteers for women's organizations such as Manavi and Sakshi, conducting weekly webinars and seminars. Ms. Prashanthi Reddy, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Preeti. Good to be back.
Likewise. So today's topic, as we know, is alternatives to H-1B visas. There are hundreds of thousands of aspiring immigrants, students, and professionals trying to make it to this land of opportunities to prove and make a living. But given the availability of limited number of visas and the lottery system, many remain disheartened. There seems to be another alternative and many other alternatives for the H-1B visas. So, Ms. Reddy, would you be able to throw some light on the opportunities available apart from H-1B? And as we go into the more opportunities, then we can delve deeper into each visa type.
Sure. I'll just list some and talk briefly about it, then we can go more into detail. Well, first is, of course, you can, if the company is cap exempt because they are a nonprofit or institution of higher education or a research organization, then they don't even have to worry about the cap. Then they can file the H-1 at any, given point of time. So that's one thing to immediately consider. And the second is if that person filed for a H-1 in the past 6 years and then they went to another status and they're coming back to H-1, we have to remember that they're not subject to the cap anymore. So, sometimes people don't realize that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. We also have the O visa, which is reserved for individuals with extraordinary ability in the sciences and the arts. And we have the P visa, which can be used for performances, so performance visa. So may not be so much for technical people, but the O visa definitely can be used for technical people as well. Then, of course, we have the L1s, which is very popular. It's the intra-company transferee visa. That is, if you've worked in the parent organization, you can be transferred from the foreign parent organization to the US organization.
Let's
Provided
delve more into L1A and L1B, Ms. Reddy.
Sure. Should I just list out first? Let's quickly go through the list and then I will go back to your L1. There's also TN. There's H1B1 for Singapore and Chile. There's E3 for Australia. And there's E1, E2 treaty traders for certain countries. And we can go into that as well in more detail. And of course, if all else fails, there's of course F1, OPT and CPT, something to keep in mind also, because a lot of students don't get picked in the first round. So they use their OPT and CPT and STEM OPT to continue to stay in the country and to try for the next round of lottery. And if you belong to a country other than India and China, where all green card categories are quite backlogged, if you belong to the rest of the world, you can also file directly for a green card because EB1 is current for rest of the world. So that's something to keep in mind. So having gone through that list, shall we talk about L1 more in detail now?
Yes, please. L1A and L1B, please.
Okay. So L1 is L1 visa allows multinational companies who have a presence abroad to transfer their employees from their overseas office to their US office. This is a good option for employers seeking to boost their presence in the US, like they're starting up in the US. So a foreign national who is currently in the US most probably will not qualify for an L1 because they have to have been working for that foreign company for at least 1 year out of the last 3 years. So if the person has been on a H1 for many years or F1 for 3 or 4 years, they may not qualify because 1 year out of the last 3 years, they should have worked for the multinational company abroad. So if that basic criteria is met, then we can look further into the L1 category. The benefit of the L1 is that the L2 spouses are automatically allowed to work. They don't even have to file for an EAD. They're automatically work authorized. So going back to some of the criteria for the L1, there has to be a company abroad, there has to be a company in the US, there has to be a relationship, a qualifying relationship between the company abroad and the company in US. That is, it should be either a parent, a subsidiary, an associate, a branch. You see, one of these relationships has to exist between both the companies. And as I said, the beneficiary should have worked for 1 year out of the past 3 years in an executive level position. That is, as a manager, vice president, president, top level. And you
Okay,
have
one
to
of
be
the
able
top
to,
level executives.
exactly, exactly. And you have to be able to prove that they worked in that top level. So you have to have it usually is good. L1 is good for slightly larger companies with, a few employees because you have to show that beneficiary at least manage two levels of employees. So you have to submit an org chart which shows that, there's one level and then below that there's another level and this person is actually on the top level in an org chart. So that helps. So if there is, for example, a company in India with only one employee, that is not possible, right? It's not possible to show an org chart with one employee or two employees, and there's no two levels of employees. So it usually lends itself well to companies that have, a lot of employees, like 5, 10, 15, more the better. Then it's easy to show that, this person is working as an executive. So in addition to managing other people, the duties itself should be that of an executive, meaning or a manager. It can be manager or executive. So if it's manager, they should be managing other employees. You have to submit documentation to show how they're managing, maybe email correspondence to show that they are managing other either particular department or managing certain employees in that department. Also, you can show that they're signing off on important documents. You can show that they're part of the board meetings, and there's, in the minutes of the meeting, you can show that they're,
So
certain
how
executive
easy is
functions.
it? As compared to
It's,
H-1B visa, how easy is to get this L1A or L1B visa?
I think a H1 is easier to get if you qualify. An
Mhm.
L1, the qualifications are slightly more stringent. For a H1, it's just a bachelor's degree in a specific field, right? For an
If you
L1,
qualify, if you
yeah,
qualify for L1.
even if you qualify for an L1, I think there is some amount of subjective evaluation that is done by the officer. So in a H1, it's pretty straightforward, cut and dry. You have this. 90% of the, instances it'll get approved, and it's easy to predict whether it'll get approved or not. For an L1, it's not that easy to predict because the size of the company, are they doing executive level work or not? Is the documentation enough? So there's some amount of subjective evaluation. So L1s are more likely to get an RFE, and they're also more likely to get denied. Also, depending on the
Mhm.
administration and the USCIS, in under that particular administration, they may view L1s more strictly or less, and approve them more easily or less easily.
Okay, okay. Yeah. So that they do have an advantage, the managers and executives, they do have an advantage though to try out in this category. So
So
let's move
big,
on. Let's move on to the
the big advantage is for an L1A that they qualify for EB1, multinational executive, EB1C. So EB1C is EB1 category, so obviously that's better than EB2 or EB3. So that's the huge advantage that they have, especially for Indian nationals because they uh,
strive for green cards.
correct. And all the other EB2s and EB3s are so backlogged. EB2 is
Mhm.
2022, so it's not that bad. So
Mhm.
most people are trying to work for multinational companies and get qualified for EB1. The other
Mhm.
advantage for an L1 is also that you can own the company and apply for an L1 as the owner of the company, which is
Okay.
more difficult for a H1. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another big advantage. If you're a business owner and you want to come to the US and establish your company here, that's
Mm-hmm.
a great opportunity to do so on an L1.
Mm-hmm.
So L1B is slightly different from L1A. L1B is specialized knowledge and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
come under EB1 category. You have to file a regular labor cert, I-140, just it comes under EB2 or EB3. So, it's good to look at L1A. But L1B is also an option in lieu of a H1 if you're not able to, if the cap gets over.
Okay. So now that you've explained, the differences are pretty clear. I'm sure it is going to help our aspiring immigrants. So let's look into the next category, which is O1.
Right. So, for an O1, O1 is basically a non-immigrant visa where you need an employer again, and you have to show that the person is coming into the country to perform work in a certain field of either sciences or arts, or it could be education, business, athletics, even television and motion picture industry people use O1. But you have to show that the person who's coming on an O1 has extraordinary ability in that particular field. So they should have received awards. uh, they should be top in their field. They should have a lot of media recognition. Maybe they have letters from other people who are top in their field, recommending them recommendation letters and saying that they are also top. They should have awards. Um, Maybe they're judging the work of other people, and that shows that they're high caliber. Maybe they're a member of certain elite organizations where, in order to become a member, you have to, uh, really be something. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're reviewing the work of others, maybe they're doing presentations. So there are many ways of showing that a person has extraordinary ability, and these are some of the ways. Of course, if you have a Nobel Prize or something or some big award, then they don't care about all these different other things. But if you don't, then they look into each and everything to see. And again, it's subjective, just as
Mm-hmm.
more subjective than the L1. In fact, it's kind of similar to the EB1A.
Mm-hmm.
uh, but a little easier because it's a non-immigrant petition. It's not, you don't get a green card. So that's the O1. You have to file an I-129 petition just as the same form as the H1.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get most probably an expert opinion letter, an advisory letter from, depending on, which field you're applying in. And file. The good thing about O is there's no cap.
Okay, okay. So what is the duration of this visa when you get the O1 visa? What is the duration? How long would you get it for?
You get it for 6 years totally. Actually, for O1, sorry, for O1, there is no limit on how long you can stay on an O1. So you
Wow.
can keep renewing it every 2 years.
And that's mandatory?
Sorry? You have to
Is
renew
that
it before it
mandatory
expires.
to have
Yeah,
it renewed every 2 years?
yes. Because they only give it for 2 years at a time.
Okay, okay, that was the question. Okay, so you don't have to go out of country to get it renewed. You can
Or you can
wherever.
file an extension. Yeah, you can file an extension in the country to get it renewed.
And how many extensions do we have?
As I said, there is no limit on the number of years that you can stay on an O1.
Wow. So extraordinary individuals with extraordinary ability have an advantage of staying back.
Yeah,
As
yeah, and
as
there are only that many people who qualify, right? Uh,
absolutely
so that's why I guess USCIS doesn't care about how long they extend it for. It's not like the H1 where it's only for 6 years.
right.
Uh,
And people with such extraordinary abilities do not tend to usually pry into another country just for staying there.
right, they would be welcomed by any country, right? So,
Right. Okay, thank you so much. So that was enlightening to understand about the open visas. So next, we go into the next category, which is T1, sorry, TN.
for the TN, it's usually the TN is only for people from Canada and Mexico. For the TN visa, you basically have to be under what so as per NAFTA, as per this, there's a document which you can find online as well. They have designated jobs and they have educational requirements or experience requirements for those jobs. So as long as you are a TN authorized, you have a TN authorized job as per that list of jobs, you qualify. So you have to make sure that you are, for example, one of the jobs under TN is engineer, software engineer. So, and the requirement as per NAFTA regulations for that job is a bachelor's degree in computer science or related. So as long as you have that and you are, a software engineer or an engineer, then you can qualify for a TN. The advantage of TN is you do not have to apply with USCIS. You can apply directly at the port of entry when you're entering into the country. So you don't have to go for a visa earlier on. You don't have to apply with USCIS. You can go directly to the port of entry, put in your application, and come into the US if it gets approved. So these cases are processed at the port of entry.
Wow,
Of
that
course,
is
when
very
you're,
convenient. That is very
yeah,
convenient and very
correct.
easy,
But
quick.
once you're in the country, and if you don't want to leave, then of course you can file for an extension in the country, and then the entire process is different. You have to file an I-129 petition with USCIS, etc. So there are a
Okay.
lot of positions that qualify for TN under the NAFTA program.
Okay. So how long do they get the visa for at a time at the port of entry?
It's again for 2 years, and
Mm-hmm.
it keeps extending.
Okay. So this is
And I'm sorry,
also
I with
unlimited
reference to O, I think I said 2 years. I was confused. For O, it's 3 years. And
three
then you
years.
can keep extending it unlimited in an unlimited manner. TN also
Mm-hmm.
it's unlimited, but you get it for a period of 2 years first, and then you can extend it. So each time you
Okay.
get an extension, you need an extension. You can either leave the country and come back,
Mm-hmm.
or you can file for an extension in the country. But it's easy to leave and file at the port of entry.
Okay. Okay. So that is still convenient. So this
Correct.
is like this is again a work visa.
Yes, yes, it's a work visa. You have to work for that particular employer, whoever is filing the TN. Same as the O, by the way, you have to work for a particular employer.
Okay. So is there a chance that you can get your TN visa transferred to another company locally in US that is not from either Canada or Mexico?
You can, as long as you are a national of Canada. You have to. It's not the company that has to be from Canada or Mexico. The
Mhm.
beneficiary has to be a citizen of Canada or Mexico. And yes, you can transfer to another employer by filing a transfer, or you can leave the country and come back on a TN.
Okay. So it doesn't matter which company it is. It's basically your nationality is what decides the type of visa that you're
Citizenship.
getting into this country
Correct.
to
Yes.
work. Okay.
Correct. And there's no cap for TN.
Mm-hmm.
And the TN for Mexicans is slightly different from Canada, but uh, almost the same. The designated occupations are really the same.
Okay. Okay. So do we see like what percentage do you think would be applying for T1? So if you have any idea on top of your head.
No, but anybody who's a Canadian citizen or Mexican citizen, they don't usually go for H-1. They go only for TN because it's easier for them. So there are quite a few thousands, maybe. And I don't know exactly the number, but thousands at least. It's used quite frequently and broadly.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so thank you. So that enlightens our Canada nationals and Mexico nationals to get an idea on what and how long they can work for and what the extension dates and times are. So will that be current? Like if we were talking about the labor and also based on what you mentioned, since it's at the port of entry, we may not have any labor or any heavy documentation. Is that right?
There's no LCA filing requirement.
Hmm.
There is, it's actually, there's no form also. There has to be, I mean, okay, so for TN, you have to first get, you have to first get an LCA. approved, but that takes only 5 business days. And then you have to have a petitioner letter, and then you have to have supporting documents. But there's no I-129 form that has to be filled out when you're applying at the port of entry. But if you're not applying at the port of entry, and you're filing for an extension or transfer or change of status while you're in the country because you don't want to travel for whatever reason, then the process looks a little bit more like a H-1 where you're filing, the I-129 forms, etc. So it's a
Mhm.
longer process, and the processing time also is longer.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. So let's get into the next category, which is E3 for Australian citizens.
Yeah, the E3 is for nationals of Australian citizens, and the requirements are the same as a H-1, meaning that you have to show that the job position um, requires the job is a specialty occupation and requires a bachelor's degree in a specific field. And the E3 also you get it for 3 years at a time. And again, there is no limit to how long you can be on an E3. Uh, and here you don't go to the port of entry, but you actually go to the consulate in Australia to apply for an E3. So again, no pre-approval is required from USCIS. You have to again file for an LCA and prepare a petitioner letter and do an evaluation of your degrees to show that you qualify. And the petitioner letter has to show that, it's a specialty occupation, so you have to have all that information in there. And of course, get your degrees evaluated. And so it's a much simpler process than a H because you don't have to submit anything with USCIS. But same as the TN, once you're in the country, if you want to file an extension or you want to file a change of status, then it becomes a longer process, just like the H. You have to file an I-129 petition and, all the documentation exactly like you would file a H-1.
So
But there's no
attaining the
cap.
actual,
There's no
sorry, go ahead.
cap there's no cap for a E3. So that's a big advantage.
Wow. So attaining the actual visa initially is much faster than getting the extensions, right?
Yeah, so even when instead of doing an extension in the country, most people will just go out of the country and
Okay.
apply at the
And get a
consulate.
fresh one.
Yeah, because that's
Okay.
faster.
Right. Right. That makes so much sense. Thank you. And the next category, H1B1.
H-1B1 is for limited, only for one country, I mean, two countries, Singapore and Chile. And they have a separate 10,000 quota, the cap, and the cap usually doesn't get over. So if you're a citizen of Singapore or Chile, then that will help you. So as you see, all these are country specific. TN, E3, H1B1, all country specific, only for of certain countries. So as I said, Singapore and Chile, exactly same as a H1. All the requirements are the same. It's just that you're marking a different box in the I-129 petition, in the I-129 forms, but otherwise everything else is the same. The only difference is there is a cap, but it's a separate cap for nationals from this country.
Okay. So when we say similar to H1, then the timeline is the same, not just
Everything
the
is,
documentation, even the timeline.
yes, everything is the same.
Okay. So in that case, our India, only the nationals of Chile and Singapore are eligible. So it will not be useful for our Indian nationals.
Definitely not. None of these are useful unless they move to these countries and become citizens of
So
those countries.
that's that's an even longer process.
May not be compared to what they have to deal with in the US.
Okay. Or maybe the L1A or L1B if they
Yeah,
qualify.
but as I said, it's easier,
Hmm.
I mean, to get citizenship from some of these countries than it is, sometimes, especially when people have to file H-1s and they don't get picked in the lottery, and they file
Mhm.
every year and they run out of options sometimes. So for them, might be make more sense to become a Canadian national or a Mexican national, and then find their way back to the US from there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And that makes so much sense. Yeah. So, and the next category, J1.
So J1 is for exchange students, and there are two types of J1. Again, the organization has to qualify to be able to file a J1 for you, and they have to be pre-qualified by USCIS, and not many organizations qualify for J1. And the J1 is usually is used by different people. It could be used by seasonal workers, like people who come in for summer jobs, during the high season. Suppose they're in a ski resort, then they might come in, at the ski resort to work in the winter on a J1. They might come in the summer at other places where they have summer activities, right? Again, they work in all these resorts, etc. They are J1. The J1, you see teachers, etc., coming in on a J1. You see a lot of doctors coming in on a J1. So doctors especially are subject to the the country, the stay in home country rule. So if once upon completion of their J1, they cannot file a change of status. They have to leave the country, stay outside the country for 2 years in their home country, and then they can come back on a different visa. So you can't file a change of status from a J1. That's a disadvantage. And the other disadvantage is your organization should be qualified and should be certified as a J1 employer. So not many people qualify for J1 because employers don't qualify. But it's used in a wide variety of ways. Even sometimes babysitters come on a J1. And not all J1s are subject to the country stay. So only some are, and the way you find that out is by looking at their visa. So that's the J1 category.
So,
And
how
again,
long do you get this visa?
there's no cap for a J1. It depends on however long the employer requires them to be here. Again, I don't remember exactly what the time period is for a J1. I don't think there is any limit for how long you can be on a J1.
Mm-hmm.
But, it depends really on how long the employer requires you. Most J1s are for a short period of time usually, because then if you're a doctor, for example, they transfer to a green card by filing a waiver. If you don't want to go back to your home country for the 2 years and come back, and you want to file a change of status or a green card application, then doctors have a way of doing that. They work in an underserved area, in a poor area for 5 years, and they're able to get J1 waivers.
Okay.
So that's what usually ends up happening.
Okay. Okay. So thank you so much, Ms. Reddy, for giving us your valuable thoughts and information on the various types of alternatives for H1B visas. So thank you so much for being with us today. Have a great
Oh,
day.
thank you. Thank you.